Deep space is silent. No signals, no life, no sound. But then, we found it. A massive dead ship drifting in the darkness. No crew, no power, no reason it should exist. NASA called it abandoned until we got close. Our systems started failing. Radio went dead. And then the ship spoke, not through sound, but directly into our minds. And in that moment, we realized something terrifying. It wasn't dead. It was waiting. Nobody in Sector 9 believed the signal was real. Not at first, because that ship had been dead for 247 years. Gone, destroyed, wiped from existence. At least, that's what history said. The first signal arrived at exactly 2:13 Galactic Standard Time. Weak, broken, almost impossible to hear. A whisper in deep space. Then the audio cleaned itself, and every officer inside Relay Station Echo froze, because the voice was human. Cold static crackled through the speakers. Then a man whispered, "If anyone hears this." Silence. Heavy silence. Then breathing. Slow. Painful. Like someone had been trying to survive for a very, very long time. Don't let them open the lower deck. The transmission cut. Inside the control room, nobody moved. Commander Velkin slowly turned toward the communication screen. His gray skin looked pale, even for a Cathari. "That ship," he said quietly. "No." One officer swallowed hard. "You think it's real?" Nobody answered, because everyone knew the name. Everyone. Especially military command. The dead human warship, USS Black Horizon, a ship lost during humanity's first contact war, declared destroyed, crew missing, status dead. For 247 years, Commander Velkin stood slowly. His claws tapped against the metal table. Run confirmation. The room exploded into movement. Screens lit up, signals flashed, coordinates appeared. Then, the room went silent again, because the signal, it was real. And worse, it was coming from deep inside forbidden space. A place no ship entered. A place pilots whispered about. The graveyard belt. A dead region of space. Dark, cold, wrong. Ships disappeared there. Military fleets avoided it. Even pirates stayed away. Nobody knew why. Only rumors. Broken ships. Mad survivors. Things moving in the dark. Things without names. Commander Velkin stared at the screen, then quietly said, "Contact the Council." 3 hours later, the emergency meeting began, and nobody was happy. The Galactic Council chamber stretched for miles. Hundreds of species, hundreds of worlds, millions watching live. The moment the human signal played, the room changed. Shock, confusion, fear. A massive reptilian senator slammed his fist down. That ship was destroyed. A machine diplomat turned its glowing eyes. Impossible. Another senator leaned forward. Humans confirmed the destruction themselves. Then, someone laughed. A soft laugh. Mocking. General Sarvak, commander of the Vex Dominion fleet. Tall, cold eyes. A man who hated humans. "They exaggerate," he said. "They always have." Low chuckles spread. Sarvak leaned back. "Humans are emotional creatures. Primitive, violent, unstable, but impressive liars." More laughter. "They probably abandoned the ship and forgot where they parked it." The chamber laughed harder. Except the human ambassador didn't. Admiral Mira Kane sat silently, hands folded, eyes cold, very cold. She didn't laugh, didn't react, didn't blink. That made Sarvak uncomfortable. He looked toward her. You disagree? Her voice stayed calm, too calm. If the black horizon sent a signal. She paused. You should all be afraid. The laughter stopped. A senator frowned. Why? Mira looked at the screen, and for the first time, fear touched her face. Because that ship wasn't carrying soldiers. Silence. What was it carrying? Mira hesitated, then quietly said, something humanity buried. And suddenly, nobody wanted to laugh anymore. The chamber went silent, not normal silence, the kind that felt heavy, like the room itself had stopped breathing. Admiral Mira Kane didn't move, didn't blink. Her eyes stayed locked on the signal, on the words nobody wanted to hear again. Don't let them open the lower deck. General Sarvak leaned forward slowly. The confidence? Gone. What? He said carefully. What exactly was humanity hiding? Mira stayed quiet, too quiet. Then she stood, slow, controlled, like someone choosing every word very carefully. 247 years ago, she said, humanity was losing. The massive council screen shifted. Old war footage appeared. Burning planets, broken fleets, dead stations floating through space, alien warships cutting through human defenses like paper. Back then, Mira continued, humans weren't respected. A bitter smile crossed her face. We weren't feared. We were weak. A few senators shifted awkwardly. Because that part was true. Humans had once been considered soft, too emotional, too divided, too fragile. The Vex Dominion especially believed that. General Sarvak crossed his arms. We remember. His voice carried quiet arrogance. You survived because stronger species showed mercy. Mira looked at him and smiled. Not a warm smile, not friendly. The kind of smile that made people nervous. No, she said quietly. We survived because we learned. The room fell silent again. Mira turned toward the giant screen. The Black Horizon wasn't just a warship. It was a classified military transport. No one moved. No one spoke. Then, a machine diplomat asked, what was it transporting? Mira hesitated. For the first time, real fear touched her face. A project. The room shifted. What kind of project? Mira looked away, then finally said, a weapon humanity promised never to build again. That hit the chamber hard. Because humans already had a reputation. Dangerous, creative, terrifying when desperate. The species who invented nuclear fire before fully leaving their own planet. The species that weaponized asteroids. The species who once turned an entire moon into a bomb. And now, apparently, there had been something worse. General Sarvak frowned. You expect us to believe humans built some terrifying superweapon, then conveniently lost it. Mira's expression darkened. You think this is funny? No. Sarvak leaned back. I think humans enjoy drama. Low laughter spread again. Weak laughter. Nervous laughter. Nobody sounded confident anymore. Because something about Mira, something felt wrong. She looked scared. And humans usually hid fear well. Then, a transmission officer ran into the chamber, out of breath, panicked. Another signal. The room froze. What? The officer swallowed hard. We cleaned the audio. His hands shook. There's more. Mira stood instantly. Play it. The lights dimmed. Static filled the room. Heavy breathing. Metal groaning. Like a ship dying somewhere very far away. Then, a voice. The same human voice. Weaker now. More afraid. If anyone hears this, A cough. Wet. Painful. They're in the walls now. The chamber froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The man continued. We thought they were dead. Metal screeched somewhere behind him. Then a sound. Soft. Wrong. Like something moving through vents. Slow. Crawling. Watching. The human voice lowered to a whisper. If this signal reaches Earth. He stopped, breathing harder. Don't come looking for us. Something slammed in the distance. Hard. Fast. The man whispered, Oh God. Then, the transmission ended. The chamber exploded. Questions? Panic. Arguments. What are they? What survived? What was in the lower deck? General Sarvak stood. This changes nothing. Everyone turned. He straightened his uniform. One damaged ship sends ghost stories. His voice sharpened. We investigate. Mira looked horrified. No. Sarvak ignored her. I'll send a fleet. No. Mira repeated. Louder this time. You don't understand. Sarvak smirked. I understand humans panic. Mira stepped closer. Cold anger in her eyes. No, she said quietly. You really don't. The black horizon was never supposed to return. The room went still again. Mira lowered her voice. That ship was sealed. Buried. Forgotten. A senator frowned. Why? She hesitated. Then, quietly, because what happened on board, her voice almost broke, wasn't survivable. Nobody laughed anymore. Not now. Sarvak crossed his arms. What exactly escaped? Mira looked toward him. Long silence. Then, 3 words. Words that changed the room. We never knew. The chamber felt colder. Nobody liked uncertainty, especially not military leaders. And humans admitting fear. That scared people even more. A robotic diplomat tilted its head. Clarify. Mira took a slow breath. The black horizon found something. The screen changed again. An old image appeared. Dark space. A massive object. Broken. Floating. Too large to be natural. Too strange to be built. An abandoned structure. Dead. Ancient. Wrong. What is that? Someone whispered. Mira looked at the image. We still don't know. It was discovered near the graveyard belt. Drifting. Silent. Impossible. General Sarvak frowned. A station? No. A ship? No. Mira's voice dropped. We think. She hesitated. It was alive. The room erupted again. Impossible. Ridiculous. Absurd. But Mira wasn't smiling, wasn't joking. And somehow, that made it worse. The black horizon entered the structure, Mira said. The crew stopped responding after 11 hours. The image shifted. Old footage. Shaky helmet cams. Dark corridors. Human soldiers moving carefully. Flashlights shaking. Something scratched behind the walls. A soldier whispered, Did you hear that? Then, movement. Fast. Too fast. The footage cut instantly. The room watched in silence. Mira spoke again. 3 days later, the black horizon tried to leave. A pause. But something came with them. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to. General Sarvak finally broke the silence. You're telling me humans lost control of some monster? Mira stared directly into his eyes. No. That answer confused him. No? Mira stepped closer. Her voice became dangerously quiet. We lost control of the humans. The chamber froze. Every species stared at her. What? She swallowed once. The crew changed. They stopped sleeping, stopped speaking, stopped acting human. The room grew colder. They became violent, stronger, unpredictable, terrified of the lower deck. a senator whispered. What was down there? Mira shook her head slowly. We don't know, because nobody who entered came back. Silence. Heavy silence. Then, every screen inside the chamber flashed red. Emergency alert. People jumped. A technician shouted. Another transmission. The room froze. Again. Static filled the speakers. This time, screaming. Human screaming. Gunfire. Metal tearing. Someone crying. Then, a terrified voice shouted. They opened the lower deck. The chamber erupted. Then, a new voice entered. Deep. Slow. Wrong. Not human. Not alien. Something else. Something ancient. Something impossible. And it whispered, we remember your species. Static exploded. Transmission lost. Complete silence. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, Admiral Mira Kane whispered the words nobody wanted to hear. Oh no. Her face turned pale. They found Earth. The chamber went dead silent. No arguments. No laughter. No politics. Just fear. Pure fear. Because whatever spoke through that signal, it knew what Earth was, and nobody liked that. Not even General Sarvak. The proud Vex commander stood frozen, jaw tight, eyes locked on the dead transmission screen. Then, he finally spoke. What? His voice sounded different now, less arrogant. What exactly was that? Admiral Mira Kane didn't answer immediately, because the truth sounded insane. Even now, even after 247 years, she slowly turned toward the council and quietly said, we called it the hollow signal. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. A robotic diplomat tilted its head. Clarify. Mira swallowed, then looked toward the stars outside the chamber glass, like she hated remembering. The first crew didn't see creatures. Silence. They heard voices. A senator frowned. Voices. Mira nodded. Familiar voices. The room shifted. What do you mean, familiar? Her expression darkened. The dead. That landed hard. Very hard. Family members. Friends. People who should not have been alive. Voices from memory. General Sarvak scoffed. Psychological warfare. Hallucinations. Mira looked at him, cold. Sharp. No, the recordings captured them too. That shut him up. Because recordings didn't hallucinate. The council screens changed again. Old classified footage. Black and white. Grainy. Shaky. A human marine stood in a narrow corridor, breathing hard. Sweat dripping down his face. His flashlight shook violently. Then, a voice echoed behind him. Soft. Gentle. Familiar. Danny. The soldier froze. His face changed instantly. Fear. Pain. Hope. Slowly, he turned. Mom. The chamber froze. The Marine stepped forward, eyes wide, breathing harder. You died. Static crackled. Then, the footage distorted. Something moved in the darkness. Tall. Wrong. Almost human. But not. Its shape bent strangely, like reality itself didn't fit around it. The Marine whispered, "No." The thing smiled and repeated, "Danny." The footage ended instantly. The chamber stayed silent. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to. Mira crossed her arms. The crew stopped trusting each other. They stopped sleeping. They started hearing voices everywhere. Dead people. Impossible things. One by one, they changed. A senator whispered, "What happened to them?" Mira hesitated. Then, quietly, they opened the lower deck. Nobody liked that answer. Nobody. Because somehow, that sentence felt dangerous. Like saying it out loud mattered. General Sarvak folded his arms, and humans lost control. No. Mira looked exhausted now. We sealed the ship. What? We trapped them. That shocked the room. You abandoned your own crew. Her jaw tightened. No. We saved humanity. The room went quiet again. Mira activated another file. A warning appeared across every screen. Classified human military footage. The date, 247 years ago. The video began. A dark command room. Human officers shouting. Red emergency lights flashing. A terrified voice yelled, "Seal the deck." Gunfire echoed. Screaming. Something slammed against reinforced steel. Hard. Again. 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 A commander shouted, "Get us out of here." Then, the camera turned, and everyone in the council froze, because standing at the end of the hallway was a human. At least, it used to be. Its body looked wrong. Too tall. Bones twisted. Eyes black. Skin stretched unnaturally tight. Its mouth moved slowly, like it was learning how humans smiled. Then, it spoke. In a calm voice. A familiar voice. The voice of someone standing beside the camera. "We're still human." The officer recording whispered, "Oh God." Then, the creature smiled wider. Too wide. And behind it, shapes moved. More humans. Watching. Standing perfectly still. The footage cut. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. General Sarvak looked unsettled now. Actually unsettled. What? He paused. What happened to them? Mira's answer came quietly. We never figured it out. The robotic diplomat processed the footage. No known biological explanation. Correct. Mira said. No virus. No parasite. No infection. Then what was it? Her expression darkened. We think. She stopped. Like she hated the next words. It changed her mind first. The room felt colder. Much colder. Fear. Memories. Grief. It learned people. A senator whispered. Like a predator. Mira nodded once. Exactly. It studied humans. Copied them. Used emotions. And the longer someone stayed near it, she looked at the screen, the less human they became. Nobody liked where this was going. Nobody. Then, a military officer rushed inside the chamber. Panicked. Out of breath. Emergency. Everyone turned. What now? The officer looked terrified. 3 border stations just went dark. The room froze. What? No signals. No survivors. No explanation. The officer swallowed hard, then said the words nobody wanted to hear. They were near the graveyard belt. Silence. Heavy silence. Then, every screen inside the council chamber flashed red again. Incoming transmission. Unknown source. The room froze instantly. Mira whispered. No. The signal activated. Static. Heavy breathing. Metal scraping. Then, a familiar human voice. Weak. Broken. Terrified. Please. Everyone leaned forward. The voice continued. If anyone hears this. A pause. Painful breathing. They're not hunting us anymore. The chamber went still. What? Someone whispered. The voice shook. Oh God. They're building something. Silence. Cold silence. Then, a sound echoed through the transmission. Low. Massive. Like metal moving against metal. Something enormous. The man whispered. We thought the ship was dead. His breathing became unstable. But, a pause. Fear. Real fear. The ship. Something screamed in the distance. Not human. Not alien. Wrong. The man whispered. The ship is alive. The transmission cut. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, the council chamber lights died. Everything went black. Dark. Cold. Silent. Then, a voice echoed through the room. Deep. Ancient. Impossible. Not from the speakers. Inside the chamber. Inside the walls. Inside their heads. And it whispered, "Humanity remembers us." Then, something moved in the darkness. Right behind Admiral Mira Kane. Darkness. Complete darkness. The council chamber felt wrong. Cold. Too cold. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because that voice, it wasn't coming through speakers. It wasn't translated. It wasn't even sound. People felt it. Inside their heads. Inside their bones. Like something ancient had reached into the room and whispered directly into their minds. Humanity remembers us. Then, something moved. Right behind Admiral Mira Kane. Fast. Too fast. Mira spun around instantly. Hand already on her sidearm. The room stayed dark. Silent. Then, a soft sound. Dripping. Slow. Wet. A senator whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Then, emergency lights flickered on. Red. Weak. Broken. And the entire chamber froze. Because standing near the center platform was someone who absolutely should not have been there. A human male. Tall. Military uniform. Burned. Torn. Old blood across his chest. The uniform patch read, USS Black Horizon. No one breathed. No one moved. General Sarvak stepped back. Impossible. The ship disappeared almost 250 years ago. Everyone on board should be dead. The man stood perfectly still, head lowered, breathing slowly, almost unnaturally calm. Then he looked up, and half the room recoiled. His face looked wrong. Not damaged, not injured. Wrong. Like someone had tried to rebuild a human face from memory. Eyes too dark, smile too slow, skin stretched strangely tight. General Sarvak growled, "Security." Nothing happened. No guards entered. No alarms. No movement. The station felt dead. The man finally spoke. Quiet voice. Calm. Almost gentle. "We heard your signal." Nobody answered. Nobody even blinked. Admiral Mira Kane slowly raised her weapon. Her hand shook. "Stay back." The man tilted his head, like he didn't understand fear. Then he smiled, too wide. "You remember us?" Mira's expression changed instantly. Recognition. Pure horror. "No." Her voice cracked. "No way." The man looked at her and softly said, "Hello, Mira." The chamber froze because Mira Kane had never met anyone from the Black Horizon. Not personally. The ship vanished before she was born. So how? How did this thing know her name? Mira slowly stepped backward. "How do you know me?" The thing smiled wider, then quietly said, "Your father missed you." That hit her hard enough to stop breathing, because her father had died 30 years ago. Nobody in the galaxy knew that. Nobody, except family. The thing took one slow step forward. "He talked about you." Another step. All the time. Mira's face turned pale. "You're not him." "No," the creature whispered. "We're learning." The room shifted. People backed away. Fear spreading fast. Because now they understood. This thing didn't just mimic voices. It knew people. Memories. Pain. Love. Grief. It weaponized them. General Sarvak finally moved. Blaster raised. Cold anger in his eyes. "I'm done with this." Mira snapped toward him. Don't. Too late. Sarvak fired. The energy blast hit the creature directly in the chest. The impact threw it backward. Hard. Silence. Smoke filled the chamber. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then, the body slowly stood back up, completely unharmed, and smiled. General Sarvak stepped back. For the first time, fear entered his eyes. The creature looked almost amused. We remember war. Its voice changed suddenly. Deeper now. Older. Wrong. Then, something happened to its body. Bones shifted. Skin moved. Cracked. Its human shape twisted violently. People screamed. Metal groaned. The chamber lights flickered harder. And standing where the human had been was something else. Tall. Thin. Impossible. Its limbs bent wrong. Its face looked unfinished. Like reality itself refused to understand what it was seeing. The room temperature dropped instantly. Breath turned visible. Then, the creature smiled again. Except now, its mouth stretched too far, far beyond human limits. And inside, darkness. No teeth, no tongue, just nothing. A senator screamed. Another collapsed. The robotic diplomats froze completely. System failure. Admiral Mira whispered, "Oh God." The creature tilted its head. We missed humanity. Its voice echoed unnaturally, like thousands of voices speaking together. Children, adults, dead soldiers, broken whispers. General Sarvak raised his weapon again, but this time his hands shook. What are you? The thing paused. Long silence. Then, quietly, we are what comes after loneliness. Nobody understood that. Nobody wanted to. Then, every screen inside the chamber activated at once, all showing the same thing. A live feed. Deep space. The graveyard belt. And floating there, something massive. Something impossible. The black horizon. But it wasn't alone anymore. Around it, ships. Thousands of them. Dead ships. Alien ships. Human ships. Warships long believed destroyed. Floating together. Connected. Like a graveyard waking up. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed. Because every ship, every single one, should have been dead. Then, movement. Slow. Terrifying. The fleet turned toward civilized space, toward the galaxy, toward Earth. Mira's blood ran cold. No. The creature looked toward the screen, almost proudly. You left us alone. Its voice deepened. So, the room grew colder. We learned how to survive. General Sarvak whispered, "How many are there?" The creature smiled. Then, every light inside the chamber exploded. Darkness again. Screaming. Panic. Something moved through the room. Fast. Too fast. People started disappearing. One senator screamed. Then, silence. Another shouted, "What's touching me?" Metal tore somewhere nearby. A guard opened fire wildly. Energy blasts flashed through darkness. Then, stopped suddenly. A wet sound echoed. Then silence. Mira grabbed Sarvak's arm. "We need to move." He looked stunned. Actually stunned. "You knew this existed?" "No," she snapped. "We buried it." Another scream echoed. Closer this time. Something dragged across the floor. Heavy. Slow. Hungry. Mira pulled out a flashlight. The beam shook violently, then stopped, because 20 feet ahead, someone stood in the hallway. A little girl. Human. Maybe 10 years old. Crying softly. Mira froze. Impossible. The girl looked up. Eyes red. Tears running down her face. "Mum." Mira stopped breathing. No, no, that voice, that voice. Impossible. The little girl whispered again, Mom. Mira staggered backward. Because her daughter had died 11 years ago. Earth bombing. Civilian transport. No survivors. The flashlight shook in her hands. General Sarvak whispered, Who is that? Mira couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The girl slowly walked closer, still crying. You left me. Mira's hands trembled violently. No. Tears filled her eyes. You're not real. The girl stopped, then smiled. Slowly. Wrong. Too slowly. Her voice changed, deepened, became something else, something ancient, and she whispered, But your pain is. Then, the hallway behind her opened. Not a door, something worse. Like reality itself tearing apart, darkness inside, moving darkness, and thousands of glowing eyes opened at once. Nobody moved, nobody breathed, because inside that darkness, thousands of eyes stared back, watching, waiting, hungry. Admiral Mira Kane felt her knees almost give out, not from fear, from memory, because standing in front of her, still wearing the face of her dead daughter, that thing smiled. Wrong. Too slow. Too wide. Its voice echoed softly. You still miss me. Mira tightened her grip on the pistol. Her hands shook. Tears burned in her eyes. But something inside her, military instinct, survival, human stubbornness, it screamed one thing. Run. General Sarvak grabbed her shoulder. What is that thing? Mira's voice came out sharp. Don't look at it too long. What? Don't listen. The creature tilted its head. Then, its face twitched. The little girl's shape flickered, like bad hologram static. For 1 second, something else showed underneath. Something tall, thin, ancient. Wrong. Then, the hallway behind it moved. Not the floor, not the walls, the darkness itself. Like something massive was crawling inside reality. Mira stepped backward. Slowly, very slowly. Everyone move, she whispered. Nobody moved, because senators, military leaders, alien diplomats, they stood frozen, watching, hypnotized. The little girl smiled again. Mom. Her voice cracked, painfully real. You left me there. Mira froze. That sentence, that exact sentence, the last thing her daughter said before the bombing. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The creature leaned forward slightly. You couldn't save me. Sarvak looked confused, then worried. Mira. Her breathing became shaky, because part of her, the broken part, wanted to believe, wanted this to be real, wanted one impossible miracle. But then, the girl blinked, and for half a second, her eyes became completely black, empty, cold, hungry. Mira snapped out of it instantly, and fired. The shot exploded through the hallway. The creature vanished, gone, like smoke. Then, something laughed, deep, echoing, everywhere. The hallway lights shattered instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. Screaming exploded across the chamber. A senator shouted, It's touching me. Another scream. Then silence. Wet silence. Something dragged across the floor. Heavy. Slow. Mira grabbed Sarvak's arm. Move! The two sprinted through the emergency corridor. Red backup lights flickered weakly. Broken sparks showered from the ceiling. Behind them, the sounds kept getting worse. Whispers, crying, people begging, voices of loved ones, dead loved ones. A massive alien senator stopped moving in the hallway. frozen, tears running down his face. "No," he whispered softly. "You're dead." Something invisible wrapped around him, pulled him backward into darkness. Fast. Too fast. His scream ended instantly. Sarvak looked horrified. "What is happening?" Mira kept running. "It learns grief." What does that even mean? "It hunts emotions." The hallway shook violently. Metal groaned. Somewhere far away, something massive moved. Not footsteps. Too heavy for footsteps. Like an entire building dragging itself closer. The station lights flickered again. Then, every screen activated at once. A message appeared. "Do not trust your memories." Then disappeared. Sarvak frowned. What was that? Mira froze. Her face changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Human protocol. What? She looked around carefully, then whispered, "Someone survived." The corridor trembled again. A loud metallic bang echoed nearby. Something slammed against reinforced doors. Hard. Again. 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 Sarvak raised his blaster. "We need soldiers." "No," Mira snapped. "We need distance." A soft voice echoed behind them. Quiet. Almost kind. "You always run." Mira stopped breathing. No, she knew that voice. Slowly, very slowly, she turned, standing 20 feet away. Her father, young, healthy, wearing the old Earth Navy uniform, the same one from childhood photos. He smiled sadly. "You never came back." Mira shook her head. "No." Tears filled her eyes. "You died." He stepped closer. Slow, calm. "You left me." Sarvak whispered. "Mira." Her breathing turned uneven. Because this thing? It knew too much. Every scar, every wound, every regret. Her father's face softened. "You blamed yourself." Another step. "For 30 years. Mira's weapon lowered slightly. "No." His expression hurt, like real pain. "You were supposed to save me." Something inside Mira cracked. Then, she noticed something. His shadow. Wrong direction. Wrong movement. Like it lagged behind him. Just slightly. Human enough to fool grief. Not human enough to fool instinct. Mira raised her gun instantly. "You're not him." The smile disappeared. Slowly, painfully. Then, his body bent. Bones cracked loudly. Skin twisted. The face stretched unnaturally wide. And something ancient looked back at her. "We almost had you." Sarvak fired instantly. Blue plasma exploded through the corridor. The creature slammed into the wall. But instead of dying, it laughed, then melted into darkness. Gone. Sarvak looked shaken. "What the hell is this?" Mira swallowed hard. "We called them echoes." Silence. "What are echoes?" Her voice lowered. "Predators, but not biological." Sarvak frowned. "What does that mean?" "They don't hunt bodies." She looked behind them. "They hunt memory." The station shook violently again. Then, a loud metallic scream echoed through the walls. Not mechanical. Alive. Impossible. Sarvak stopped moving. "What was that?" Mira whispered. "The ship." "What?" The transmission was real. She looked terrified now. The black horizon, a pause, is alive. Suddenly, emergency alarms screamed across the station. Red lights flashing. A robotic voice echoed overhead. "Containment failure. Unknown organic expansion detected." Sarvak frowned. What does that mean? Then, the wall beside them moved. Both froze. Because walls. Walls shouldn't breathe. But this one did. Slow. Wet. Pulsing. Like veins spread beneath the metal. Mira backed away instantly. No. The wall twitched again, then split open, like flesh. A corridor formed inside, dark, moving, alive. Sarvak whispered, "Tell me I'm hallucinating." Mira's voice turned quiet. When the black horizon vanished, she swallowed hard. We thought the crew got infected. But we were wrong. The living hallway pulsed again. Something moved deep inside it, huge, watching, waiting. Mira looked terrified. The ship wasn't infected. Sarvak slowly turned toward her, then asked, "What infected it?" Long silence. Then a whisper, soft, cold, right behind them. Loneliness. Both spun around instantly. Nobody there, but on the wall. Words slowly appeared, written in black liquid. "You left us alone." The station shook violently. Lights exploded overhead, and far above the planet, in deep space, the dead fleet moved. Closer. Thousands of abandoned warships. Ancient, broken, awake. Heading toward civilization. Heading toward Earth. Then, a new signal arrived. Stronger this time. Cleaner. And a familiar human voice whispered, "Mira." She froze. "Don't let them wake the captain." Mira stopped walking, stopped breathing. Everything around her suddenly felt smaller, colder, wrong. Because that voice, she knew that voice. Human, male, broken, old military tone. The same voice from the first transmission. The same terrified man who whispered, "Don't let them open the lower deck." But now, he knew her name. Sarvak looked confused. "What, Captain?" Mira didn't answer. Her face had gone pale. Really pale. Because deep inside old classified military files, there was one name humanity stopped saying out loud. One person, one secret, one nightmare. The station lights flickered violently. Then, the signal returned. Cleaner now. Almost too clear. Heavy breathing echoed through the hallway. Metal creaked somewhere in the background, like an entire ship groaning in pain. Then, the voice whispered again, "Mira." A pause. Weak breathing. "If you can hear this," static cracked, "you're already too late." Mira grabbed the nearby wall. "No." Sarvak frowned. "You know him?" Her lips parted slowly. Then, quietly, "I know who he served." Silence. Sarvak waited, but Mira hesitated, like speaking the truth itself felt dangerous. Then finally, she said it. The Black Horizon had a commander, the best military officer humanity ever created. Sarvak crossed his arms. "So?" Mira looked terrified. He wasn't normal. That answer landed strangely. What does that mean? Her jaw tightened. He survived things humans shouldn't survive. Wars, massacres, psychological collapse, entire planets burning, and every single time she paused, he came back. The corridor shook violently again. Metal screamed overhead. Something huge moved somewhere inside the station. Alive. Listening. Mira lowered her voice. People started saying weird things about him. Sarvak frowned. What kind of things? That he stopped feeling fear. That he could survive impossible injuries. That enemy species surrendered just because he arrived. The lights flickered again. Then the signal whispered, "Mira." Closer this time. Impossible. Don't let them wake him. Sarvak's expression darkened. "Who is the captain?" Long pause. Then Mira whispered the name humanity buried 247 years ago. Captain Elias Ward. The hallway suddenly went silent. Too silent. Like the station itself had heard the name and didn't like it. Then Something moved in the darkness ahead, tall, slow, watching. A familiar voice echoed softly. He remembers war. The emergency lights died instantly. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, somewhere deep inside the station, something enormous opened its eyes.